Well, for this church leader tool, I am back with John Auger, the Vice President of the Delaware-Maryland Synod. This might be John's fourth or fifth church leader tool. John, it's great to have some conversation with you again.
No, great to be back here, Stuart. Yeah.
So the topic that I wanted to talk with you about is leadership expectations. You and the Synod Council have been doing some great work, particularly in searching for the team leaders in terms of leadership expectations. And I think this is something that's valuable in any context, particularly in our congregations.
Yeah, Stuart. And one of the things that I think we decided on about a year and a half ago is that as we looked at the expectations of ourselves as leaders of the Synod and then what we would expect of others working, not just at Synod level, but also at our congregational level, is what would God expect of us? What would Jesus expect of the work we do? And I guess in my experience over the years, in a lot of cases, our expectations are not high enough for ourselves, and that we're capable of much more. So there was a kind of a groundswell around, hey, let's put together a document that says, what we expect of ourselves and others, and how do we best live that out? And that document, we have 5 areas of expectations, and these again apply to any leader in any church experience. In fact, I would advocate for, with the exception of our first area, which is trusting and faithful servant in the way of Jesus Christ, these expectations apply to any leader leading anything in any environment and in any situation. So those 5 areas, again, are trusting and faithful servant in the way of Jesus Christ, how we live out our faith and are in prayer and have disciplines around how we connect with our loving God. The next one is committed to personal formation and development. This is having a commitment around improving ourselves and keeping ourselves sharp. And certainly in our culture today, Stuart, as we all know, that it is moving so fast that if we aren't improving and learning, we're falling behind. So having that, being a visionary and strategic thinker, being able to think higher than just what's going on today or tomorrow, but think about where are we 5 years from now, 4 years, how about 6 months from now, and be able to see and discern from the Holy Spirit what we should be doing, what we should be planning for and leading forward. The next area is competent and effective leader, and this is about just some personal characteristics about what is our character, how do we treat people, how do we carry ourselves, are we an example to others of what Christian leaders should be, and how do we carry that out such that others can see that in action and hopefully emulate some of those characteristics. And then the final big area is committed to teamwork and development of others. This is, again, this is not about us as being a king or a potentate or whatever your term is for a leader that some people come to mind. This is about how we get the team to succeed and working together as a team. And I always go back to the analogy of 1 + 1 = 3, right? It's not about each of us doing one individual thing, but how do we get a better product by us working together and then collaborating and getting folks' input on direction. And then also how we develop others. I think a big area of leadership is how we develop the next level of leaders and how do we coach them and mentor them to take our place when we move on to something else. So I think this has served us well. We've used this, as you had mentioned, to screen and interview our team leaders for the vision teams. And again, as a Synod Council, we're trying to use these to keep ourselves on track and make sure that we're doing what Jesus Christ would expect of us.
It's quite a list. I'm looking at the document even as you're talking about it. And for those that are listening, I will go ahead and post this document as one of the resources so folks can use that within their congregational life. John, one of the questions I have about this is how have you actually used the document? Have you prayed over it? Did you give it to folks as you were seeking? How has the document actually been used?
Document's been used. We covered it with our council, so we use this as kind of a measuring stick of how each of us are performing opposite that document, and then how we're functioning as a team. One of the things we do within our Synod Council meetings is we assign a coach for each of our meetings who looks at how the meeting went and reports out at the end of the meeting, and basically uses this and other criteria to give us feedback on how we're doing opposite the characteristics which we've outlined here. And that seems to be effective in helping us move forward and keep aligned with this.
So then when you were asking team leaders, did you also provide this document to them?
Yes, we did. And then as we did the interviews, we had our questions focused on each of the 5 areas, so that when we asked them, to give us examples under each of the 5 areas and how they had led and what their vision was under each of these, then we evaluated their answers to that to try and select the right leaders.
That's a fascinating concept, John. So you interviewed volunteers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's kind of rare. A lot of times we'll just take any warm body who says, sure, I'll be willing to do that.
Yeah, some might say I got into this position as a result of being a warm body. But I firmly believe that each of us are called to leadership roles, and sometimes we don't recognize it, right? Or we push back, or we're scared of it. And I believe God calls us all to roles in His kingdom, right? And all of us are called to be leaders in some respect, right? And if we were to recognize that as a collective body and step up to that, I think we'd be amazed at what God could do through us. I use the example, and probably a lot of folks have heard this, but when I worked in industry, the expectation of me as a leader was excellence. Okay, if I wasn't making plastics in an excellent way, I probably would be replaced. Okay, why would we expect anything less of our leaders in the church? What more important work is there than making disciples for Jesus Christ? And why would we have a lower expectation of our work in there? And then sometimes I think in the church we tend to say, hey, we're a grace-filled people. John is doing the best he can, and really John is not stepping up to the role. And is not living up to the expectations, and certainly that we need to be careful with this, that it doesn't become a stick to beat people over the head with. But that's why we wanted to get out in front of people and say, hey, this is the expectations. Realize fully before you feel like you're the one called to this role, that this is what we expect. And it's interesting too. It was funny when we first put this together and published it with the council. A few people came back and said, "Oh my gosh! I mean, this is crazy. Probably the only leader that could do this is Jesus." And I would say, yeah, the only one that did it perfect was Jesus. What a great model, right? None of us can live up to all of the things on the list as people take a look at the list, but if you're not striving each day to be the best that God has called you to do, I think we need to be held accountable for that, and that's where our council is at now. Is we want to be held accountable to being the best leaders we can be.
It's excellent. I can see myself, even just spending some time with a document, kind of reflecting on it a little bit. And I think that idea you mentioned of coaching, whether in a meeting or also sitting down with somebody who's a mentor or a coach and saying, here's some expectations that I have of myself. It's what we expect of leaders in our synod. How do you see me doing? Are there areas that I need to grow in?
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, just by chance, at noon, I met with my coach. I have a coach I meet with every month. I ask him to hold me accountable to these standards, and he gives me feedback. And that's a very helpful process to run, and it's something we're trying to make more available within our synod is coaches, trained coaches that can help our leaders grow. Because again, Christianity is a team sport, and you look at Jesus' ministry. The only time he was alone is when he went to pray. The rest of the time he was with his disciples, and he sent them out 2 by 2. He didn't send them out by themselves. And we're much stronger together than we are apart. And it's just a matter of helping each other and recognizing that we're in this together and the Holy Spirit's working through us.
Excellent. The only other question I could think to ask John is, how is this developed? What resources were used?
It was kind of a culmination of I started the draft. It was kind of a culmination of kind of life lessons and things that I have seen over my life, how God has worked through me, and the things in my leadership roles that were important. And then it was socialized amongst our leadership team that we have within our synod, and then within the synod council itself to get feedback and to hone this document. So it was not, again, we tried to model the behavior of this is a team process. So let's get team input and make sure that we're all aligned around this. But some very strong leaders have weighed in here and provided their input.
Excellent. Thank you, John, so much for that. I know our leaders will be blessed by reading it over and being challenged by it, and then using it in some forms in their congregations as well.
Very good. Very good. Glad to help, Stuart. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, John.